The afternoon sun beat down on the cracked concrete outside Rivera Aviation Repairs, a small aircraft maintenance shop that had seen better days. Inside the cramped garage, Diego Rivera stood hunched over a workbench, his hands black with grease as he tried to salvage a damaged fuel pump. At 32 years old, he looked older than his age. Worry lines had etched themselves around his eyes, and his shoulders carried the weight of a business slowly dying around him. The shop had belonged to his father. Growing up, Diego remembered this place filled with the sounds of laughter, the smell of coffee mixing with engine oil, and the constant hum of work being done. His dad had taught him everything about aircraft mechanics, passing down not just technical knowledge but a philosophy about work itself. When you fix a plane, you're not just fixing metal and wires, his father used to say. You're making sure someone gets home safe to their family. That's sacred work, mijo. But his father had been gone for 2 years now, taken by cancer that moved too fast for any of them to process, and with him went the heart of the business. The old clients respected his father's name, but corporate maintenance facilities were swallowing up contracts left and right. They had prettier offices, newer equipment, and marketing budgets that Diego could only dream about. One by one, the regular customers stopped calling. The phone that used to ring constantly now sat silent most days, and when it did ring, it was usually someone asking for money he didn't have. Diego was 3 months behind on rent. The landlord had been patient. He'd known Diego's father, but patience had limits. The equipment was aging, and Diego couldn't afford to replace anything that broke down. He'd let go of his last employee 6 months ago, unable to meet payroll. Now it was just him, working alone in a shop that felt too big and too empty. His younger sister called him every few days, her voice tight with worry. "Diego, maybe it's time to let it go," she'd said last week. "You could get a job with one of the big companies. They'd hire you in a second with your skills." But Diego couldn't bring himself to do it. Closing the shop felt like losing his father all over again, like admitting that everything the old man had built meant nothing in the end. He wiped his hands on a rag that was more grease than cloth and glanced at his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Just another slow Tuesday stretching into evening. He was considering closing up early when the phone suddenly buzzed in his pocket, making him jump. Unknown number. Probably another collection agency with a different area code. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Rivera Aviation," he said, trying to sound more professional than he felt. "Is this Diego Rivera?" The voice on the other end was female, clipped and stressed. "The aircraft mechanic?" "That's me. What can I do for you? My name is Catherine Wells. I'm operations manager for Premier Aviation Services. We have a situation, and I need to know if you can help us right now." "Like immediately," Diego straightened up. Premier Aviation handled private jets for wealthy clients. They'd never called him before. "What kind of situation?" "We have a Gulfstream G650 stranded on the tarmac at the regional airport. The starboard engine is showing problems. Vibrations, temperature spikes. The owner needs to be in Singapore for critical meetings in 12 hours. And every major repair facility we've contacted is either fully booked or can't guarantee the turnaround time we need." She paused. "Your name came up in conversation. Someone said you were the guy who could fix impossible problems." Diego's mind raced. A Gulfstream G650 was serious machinery, the kind of aircraft that cost more than most people made in several lifetimes. "Who gave you my name?" "Frank Morrison at Regional Air. He said if anyone could work miracles with limited time and resources, it was you." Frank. Diego hadn't heard from him in months, but they'd worked together years ago. The fact that Frank remembered him sent a small warm feeling through his chest. "I'd need to see the aircraft, run diagnostics. I can't promise anything without knowing what I'm dealing with." "I understand. But can you come now? We're desperate here, and I mean that literally. The owner is not someone who accepts excuses." Catherine's voice dropped slightly. "I'm authorized to offer triple your standard emergency rate. Plus expenses, triple rate." Diego calculated quickly in his head. That kind of money could cover his back rent, keep the lights on for another few months, maybe even fix the broken diagnostic computer gathering dust in the corner. But more than that, this was actual work. Real work. The kind his father used to do. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "Thank you. Ask for me at the private terminal. Catherine Wells." She hung up before he could say anything else. Diego grabbed his toolkit. The good one, the professional set his father had given him on his 21st birthday. His hands were shaking slightly as he loaded it into his truck, a 10-year-old Ford that burned oil and made concerning noises on cold mornings. He caught a glimpse of himself in the side mirror and winced. His work shirt was stained, his jeans had a tear at the knee, and he probably smelled like engine grease. Not exactly the image you want to project when meeting wealthy clients, but there wasn't time to go home and change. He climbed into the truck, said a quick prayer that it would start, and pulled out of the parking lot. The drive to the airport felt surreal. Diego kept thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What if the problem was beyond his capability? What if he made it worse? What if he embarrassed himself in front of these people and word got around that Diego Rivera couldn't cut it? He forced himself to breathe. His father's voice came back to him. Fear is just your brain trying to protect you. Acknowledge it, thank it, then put it aside and focus on the work. The private terminal was on the far side of the airport, away from the commercial flights. Diego had driven past it 1,000 times but never had reason to go inside. As he pulled up, he saw the sleek glass building that served the ultra-wealthy, the kind of people who flew private because commercial first class wasn't exclusive enough. A security guard stopped him at the entrance, but when Diego mentioned Catherine Wells, the guard's expression shifted from suspicious to accommodating. She's been waiting for you. Hangar 3, straight through. Diego parked his battered truck next to a row of luxury cars and felt extremely out of place. He grabbed his toolkit and walked toward Hangar 3, his work boots echoing on the pristine floor. Through the massive open hangar doors he could see it, the Gulfstream G650 gleaming white in the late afternoon sun. It was beautiful in the way that perfect engineering always was, all clean lines and sophisticated design. A woman in a business suit hurried over to him. Diego Rivera? Thank God. I'm Catherine. She was in her 40s, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she looked like she hadn't slept well in days. Come on, I'll introduce you to the owner. As they walked toward the aircraft, Diego noticed the cluster of people near the boarding stairs. Crew members in uniforms, a couple of guys in suits talking on phones, and then someone who could only be the owner. She stood slightly apart from the others, checking her own phone with sharp, focused movements. The woman was shorter than Diego expected, maybe 5'4", and appeared to be in her early 40s. She wore tailored gray pants and a white blouse that probably cost more than Diego's monthly rent. Her dark hair was cut in a precise bob, and when she looked up at their approach, her eyes were intelligent and assessing. There was something about her presence, an intensity, an energy, that made the space around her feel charged. Ms. Chen, this is Diego Rivera. The mechanic I told you about, Catherine said. The woman, Ms. Chen, stepped forward and extended her hand. Her handshake was firm and brief. Alexis Chen, thank you for coming on such short notice. Her voice was calm despite the obvious stress of the situation. I assume Catherine explained the basics. Engine trouble on the starboard side, Diego said. Vibrations and temperature issues during taxi. Correct. It started about an hour ago during our pre-flight check. My regular maintenance team is stranded in Chicago due to weather, and every other facility has been either unavailable or unwilling to commit to the timeline I need. She gestured toward the aircraft. I need to be in Singapore by tomorrow morning for negotiations that have been 6 months in the making. Missing them isn't an option. Diego noticed she didn't speak to him like he was just hired help. She made eye contact, her tone respectful and direct. I'll need to run a full diagnostic, he said. Look at the engine internals, check the systems. I can't make any promises until I know what we're dealing with. I understand. What do you need from us? Access to the aircraft, maintenance logs if you have them, and space to work. And everyone needs to stay clear while I'm checking the engine. Alexis nodded and turned to her crew. You heard him. Let's give him room to work. She looked back at Diego. The maintenance logs are in the cockpit. I'll have them brought to you. Anything else? Just time and a little bit of luck, Diego said. For the first time, a small smile crossed Alexis's face. I can give you the time. The luck you'll have to provide yourself. Diego approached the aircraft with his toolkit, his professional instincts taking over. The nervousness faded, replaced by the calm focus that always came when he had a machine in front of him that needed fixing. This was what he knew. This was what his father had trained him for. The rest, the money, the pressure, the wealthy owner watching from nearby, all of that fell away. He climbed up to access the engine compartment, And as his hands touched the metal, he felt something shift inside him. For the first time in months, maybe even years, Diego felt like himself again. Not the struggling business owner drowning in debt, not the son failing to live up to his father's legacy, just a mechanic doing what he did best, and he had no idea that the next few hours were going to change everything. Diego pulled himself up into the engine compartment, his practiced hands already reaching for his diagnostic tools before his eyes had fully adjusted to the tight space. The Gulfstream's engine was a masterpiece of engineering, and he felt a familiar thrill run through him. This was why he'd fallen in love with aircraft mechanics in the first place. The precision, the complexity, the way every single part had to work in perfect harmony or the whole thing failed. He started with the basics, checking fluid levels and looking for obvious signs of damage or wear. Everything seemed normal at first glance, which actually made him more concerned. The problems that were easy to spot were usually easy to fix. It was the hidden issues that kept you up at night. He connected his portable diagnostic computer, one of the few pieces of good equipment he still had, and started running through the engine's electronic systems. The readings came back, and Diego frowned. Temperature fluctuations in Sector 3, vibration patterns that didn't match normal operating parameters. He ran the test again, got the same results, and felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. 2 hours passed. Diego was vaguely aware of movement below him, voices discussing plans and backup options, but he blocked it all out. He'd learned long ago that you couldn't rush diagnostics. His father used to say that a mechanic's job was like being a detective. You had to follow the evidence wherever it led, even if it took you places you didn't want to go. He climbed deeper into the engine housing, contorting his body to reach the areas that most mechanics couldn't access without disassembling half the components. His shoulders scraped against a hot surface and he bit back a curse, but he kept going. And then he saw it. A hairline fracture in the bearing housing, barely visible, maybe a millimeter wide, but in an engine that operated under extreme stress at 30,000 feet. It might as well have been a canyon. Diego sat back as much as you could sit back in a cramped engine compartment and felt the weight of the situation settle on him. This wasn't something you could just patch up with a quick repair. The bearing housing was a critical component. If it failed completely during flight, the results could be catastrophic. Standard procedure would be to order a replacement part, which would take days, maybe a week, depending on availability. Then you'd need several more days for proper installation and testing. But Alexis Chen didn't have days. She had hours. Diego climbed down from the engine, his clothes soaked with sweat and marked with new grease stains. The sun had set while he'd been working, and the hangar was now lit with harsh fluorescent lights. He found Alexis standing near a workbench, talking on her phone in what sounded like Mandarin. When she saw him, she ended the call immediately. "What did you find?" she asked. Catherine and a couple of crew members gathered around to listen. Diego wiped his hands on his pants, a useless gesture given how dirty they already were, and chose his words carefully. "There's a hairline fracture in the starboard engine's bearing housing. It's small, but it's in a critical location. Under normal circumstances, you'd need to replace the entire housing unit, which would take at least a week once we ordered the part." Alexis's expression didn't change, but Diego saw something shift in her eyes. And under abnormal circumstances? This was the moment. Diego could play it safe, tell her there was nothing he could do, collect a fee for the diagnostic work and go home. No risk, no liability, no chance of disaster. But he thought about his father, about all those times the old man had found solutions that shouldn't have worked but did, because he understood the machines at a level that went beyond textbook knowledge. "I might have a solution," Diego said slowly, "but I need to be completely honest with you about the risks. I'm listening. I can fabricate a reinforcement bracket using specialized materials from my shop. It won't be pretty and it won't be permanent, but it could stabilize the fracture enough to get you to Singapore safely. Once you're there, you'd need to arrange proper repairs before flying back." He paused. "But if I'm wrong about the stress tolerances, if my calculations are off by even a small margin, the housing could fail during flight. And if that happens while you're over the Pacific Ocean..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone standing there understood what engine failure at altitude over open water meant. Alexis was quiet for a long moment, her gaze steady on him. "What makes you think you can do this?" "I've been working on aircraft engines since I was 16. My father taught me to see the whole system, not just individual parts. I know the stress points, the load distributions, the thermal dynamics. I've done field repairs before, nothing this complex, but the principles are the same. Diego met her eyes. I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't believe I could do it safely. But you need to understand that I'm putting my reputation and probably my license on the line. If anything goes wrong, it's on me. Why would you take that risk? Alexis asked. The question seemed genuine, not challenging. Diego thought about his empty shop, his mounting debts, the voice of his sister telling him to give up. Because this is what I do. This is what I'm good at. And because he hesitated, then decided to just say it. Because I need to know if I still have what it takes. Something in Alexis's expression softened just slightly. She glanced at Catherine, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation, then back at Diego. If you were in my position, would you take this risk? Honestly? I don't know. I'm not the one with critical meetings in Singapore. I'm not the one making decisions that affect thousands of people. I can only tell you what I can do with the tools and knowledge I have. Diego crossed his arms. But I will say this, I believe in my work. If I didn't, I wouldn't have suggested it. Alexis pulled out her phone and made a quick call, speaking in rapid Mandarin again. Diego caught enough to understand she was talking to someone about the meetings, about contingencies, about backup plans. When she hung up, she looked at Diego with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing right through him. Do it, she said. What do you need? I need to get to my shop and fabricate the parts. It'll take me at least 3 hours, maybe 4. Then installation and testing will take another 2 hours minimum. We're looking at first light before I can certify the aircraft as flight ready. Then we'd better get started, Alexis said. Catherine, arrange for whatever he needs. Diego, do you need any help? I work better alone, Diego said. But I'll need access to the engine throughout the night. You'll have it. I'll be here. Diego blinked. You don't have to stay. This is going to take all night and most of it will just be me working. You should get some rest. This is my aircraft and my responsibility, Alexis said simply. I'm not going to sit in a hotel room while someone risks their career to help me. I'll be here. Diego nodded and headed for his truck. As he drove back to his shop, the reality of what he'd just committed to hit him. He was about to attempt a repair that no manual would ever recommend, on an aircraft worth more than he'd make in several lifetimes, for a woman who probably had lawyers that could destroy him if anything went wrong. His hands were shaking slightly as he unlocked the shop. The space looked even more rundown in the harsh glare of his work lights. The cracked floor, the old equipment, the empty spots where machines used to be before he'd sold them. But the tools were still good, and more importantly, his skills were still sharp. Diego pulled out his father's old notebook, the one filled with decades of handwritten notes and diagrams. He flipped through pages of calculations and sketches until he found what he needed. A similar repair his father had done on a different type of engine, back in the 80s. The principle was the same. Distribute the load, reinforce the weak point, maintain thermal expansion tolerances. He fired up his metalworking equipment and got to work. The fabrication had to be perfect. There was no room for error, no chance to go back and fix mistakes once the aircraft was in the air. Diego cut and shaped the specialized alloy, checking measurements 3 times before making each cut. His hands moved with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of practice, but his mind was fully engaged, running calculations and scenarios. Hours blurred together. Diego's back ached from bending over the workbench. His eyes burned from the bright work lights and the intense focus. His phone buzzed a few times, his sister probably, but he ignored it. Nothing existed except the work in front of him. Around 1 in the morning, he finished the primary components. He held up the reinforcement bracket, examining it from every angle under bright light. It looked good. No, it looked perfect. He packaged everything carefully and drove back to the airport, running through the installation procedure in his head. When he arrived at the hangar, he was surprised to find Alexis sitting on an equipment crate, her jacket draped over a nearby toolbox, scrolling through something on a tablet. She looked up as he approached. "Got what you need?" she asked. "Yeah, let me get started." Diego hesitated. "You really didn't have to wait here all night." "I know." She stood up and stretched, and Diego noticed she'd kicked off her expensive shoes at some point. "Coffee? That would be amazing, actually." Alexis walked over to a small table where someone had set up a coffee station. She poured 2 cups and brought one to Diego. I called ahead and had Catherine arrange this. Figured we'd both need it. Diego took the cup gratefully and sipped. It was good coffee, the kind he couldn't afford at fancy shops. Thanks. No, thank you. For doing this. Alexis leaned against the workbench. Catherine thinks I'm crazy for trusting you. My lawyers definitely think I'm crazy. But you know what? Sometimes you have to trust your gut about people. Diego didn't know what to say to that, so he focused on setting up his tools. As he worked, though, Alexis kept talking. My father was a mechanic, she said suddenly. Not aircraft. He worked on public transit buses in San Francisco. I grew up watching him come home with grease under his fingernails, exhausted but satisfied, because he'd solved some impossible problem that day. Diego looked up, surprised. Yeah. He used to say that fixing things wasn't just about knowing how the parts worked. It was about respecting the machine, understanding what it needed. He could diagnose problems just by listening to an engine run. She smiled at the memory. I learned more about business from watching him work than I did from my MBA. What did he think about you building a tech empire? Diego asked. Alexis's smile faded slightly. He died before the company really took off. Heart attack when I was 26, but I think he would have been proud. At least I hope so. I'm sure he would have been, Diego said. He climbed up toward the engine compartment, then paused. My dad died 2 years ago. Cancer. Some days I'm not sure if I'm honoring his legacy or destroying it. The fact that you worry about that tells me you're probably doing fine, Alexis said softly. Diego got to work on the installation. It was delicate, precise work that required absolute concentration. But somehow knowing that Alexis was there, understanding what this meant made it feel less lonely. Every so often he'd climb down to check a measurement or grab a different tool, and she'd be there. Sometimes on her phone handling business, sometimes just sitting quietly, sometimes bringing him more coffee. Around 3 in the morning, as Diego was torquing a series of critical bolts to exact specifications, Alexis started talking again. Not about the aircraft or the repair, but about her journey from that working-class neighborhood in San Francisco to building Chen Technologies into a multi-billion-dollar company. She talked about the early days, sleeping in her office, eating ramen because she was investing every penny back into the company. People see the jet and the success now and they think it was always easy, she said. They don't see the years of 16-hour days, the constant rejection, the times I wasn't sure I'd make payroll. Everyone wants the results, but nobody wants to do the work. Diego understood that better than she probably realized. That's why my shop is failing, he admitted. I'm good at the work, but I'm terrible at the business side. Marketing, networking, playing the game, I don't know how to do that stuff. Do you want to learn? Alexis asked. I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe my sister is right and I should just let it go. Get a job working for one of the big companies, collect a steady paycheck, stop fighting a battle I can't win. But you haven't done that yet. No. Why not? Diego stopped working and sat back, wiping sweat from his forehead. Because it's the last piece of my father I have left. The shop, the work, the name on the door, it all means something. And maybe that's stupid, holding on to something that's dragging me under, but I can't seem to let go. It's not stupid, Alexis said. Legacy matters. The things our parents built, the values they passed down. That stuff is important. The trick is figuring out how to honor that legacy while also moving forward. They fell into a comfortable silence after that. Diego worked while Alexis handled emails and calls, dealing with the business that apparently never stopped even at 3 in the morning. But there was something peaceful about it. 2 people working through the night, each focused on their own tasks, but somehow connected by the shared experience. As dawn started to lighten the sky outside the hangar, Diego installed the final component and ran his diagnostic tests. The engine purred smoothly, all readings within acceptable parameters. The vibrations were gone. The temperature was stable. He ran the test 3 more times, checking and rechecking, because this wasn't the kind of repair where probably good enough was acceptable. Finally, he climbed down and faced Alexis, who had stood up from her crate and was watching him intently. It's done, he said. The aircraft is flight ready. But I want to be clear about what you're getting here. This is a field repair, not a factory replacement. It will get you to Singapore safely. I stake my reputation on that. But once you land, you need to arrange for proper repairs before the return flight. Don't push it, Alexis nodded seriously. I understand. And Diego? Thank you, truly. She extended her hand again, and when he shook it this time, there was something different in her grip. Warmth, respect, maybe even the beginning of friendship. Just doing my job, Diego said, but he was smiling. No, Alexis said. You did something extraordinary. And I don't forget people who come through when it matters most. As she turned to board the aircraft, Diego gathered his tools, exhausted but satisfied in a way he hadn't felt in years. The jet's engine started up and he stood there watching, making sure everything sounded right. And it did. Everything was perfect. He had no idea that Alexis Chen wasn't done with him yet. Not by a long shot. Diego stood on the tarmac watching the Gulfstream taxi toward the runway, his body aching from exhaustion but his mind strangely alert. The engine he'd repaired hummed smoothly. It sounded exactly what it should be. He'd done it. Against all odds, working with improvised materials in the middle of the night, he'd actually pulled it off. As the jet lifted into the early morning sky, Diego felt something shift inside him. For 2 years he'd been questioning himself, wondering if he still had what it took, if he was really as good as his father had been. This night had given him his answer. He was good, maybe even great. The problem wasn't his skills, it was everything else. He packed up his tools slowly, reluctant to leave. The hangar felt different now, charged with possibility instead of just another reminder of what he'd lost. Catherine appeared from the office building looking exhausted but relieved. The preliminary flight data looks good, she said. Ms. Chen wanted me to make sure you got this. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a check for an amount that made Diego's hands shake slightly. Triple the emergency rate, just as promised, plus a substantial bonus. It was enough to cover his back rent, catch up on his utilities, and keep the shop running for months. Maybe even hire someone to help with the business side of things. She also wanted me to give you her private card, Catherine added, handing him a simple business card with just a name, phone number, and email address. She said to call her when the jet returns. She'd like to speak with you. Diego pocketed the card and drove home in a daze. He should have felt triumphant, energized, ready to tackle the world. Instead, he felt oddly deflated. The high of solving an impossible problem was fading, and in its place came the reality of returning to his struggling shop, his uncertain future, the same problems that had existed before that phone call yesterday. He showered, slept for a few hours, then spent the rest of the day catching up on neglected paperwork and paying overdue bills. The check from Alexis gave him breathing room, but it didn't solve the fundamental problem. His business was still dying, just more slowly now. 3 days passed. Diego kept thinking about that night in the hangar, about the conversations with Alexis, about the way she'd understood what the work meant to him. He'd looked her up online, of course. Chen Technologies was a massive company specializing in artificial intelligence and data analytics, valued at somewhere north of $40 billion. Alexis herself was regularly featured in business magazines, always looking polished and professional, surrounded by other wealthy, successful people who inhabited a world Diego couldn't even imagine. What would someone like that want to talk to him about? Probably just a formal thank you, maybe a recommendation letter. Nothing that would change anything. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Unknown number, but with a Singapore country code. Diego? It's Alexis Chen. Her voice was clear despite the distance, and she sounded energized. The meetings went well. We got the deal we wanted. And more importantly, your repair held perfectly. The engineering team in Singapore was impressed when they examined it. They said it was one of the most elegant field repairs they'd ever seen. That's good to hear, Diego said, feeling warmth spread through his chest. Did you arrange for the proper replacement parts? Already done. The jet will be ready for the return flight in 2 days. She paused. Which brings me to why I'm calling. I'd like to meet with you again when I get back. Are you available Friday evening? Diego glanced at his calendar, which was, as usual, completely empty. Yeah, I can make that work. Good. I'll send you an address. Come at 7. She hesitated, which seemed unusual for someone who normally spoke with such confidence. Diego, this isn't just a thank you dinner. I have something I want to discuss with you. Something important. Okay, Diego said slowly. What kind of something? I'd rather talk in person. Trust me on this. She hung up before he could ask anything else. Diego spent the next 2 days alternating between curiosity and anxiety. What could Alexis Chen possibly want to discuss with him that required an in-person meeting? Job offer, maybe? Some kind of consulting arrangement? He tried not to build up his expectations too much, but his mind kept spinning scenarios. Friday evening arrived. The address Alexis had sent led him to an upscale restaurant in the city, the kind of place where Diego had never eaten, and probably never would have if not for this meeting. He'd worn his best clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt that he normally saved for the rare occasions when he had to meet with potential clients. Even so, he felt underdressed the moment he walked through the door. Alexis was already there, sitting at a private corner table. She'd changed from her business clothes into dark jeans and a simple sweater, and somehow that made Diego relax slightly. She stood when she saw him and smiled. "You found it okay?" "GPS is a wonderful thing," Diego said, sitting down across from her. "Though I'll admit, this isn't my usual type of place." "Mine either, actually. I know everyone thinks people like me eat at restaurants like this every night, but honestly, I usually just grab takeout at my desk." She poured water from the bottle on the table. "I picked it because it's quiet and we can talk without interruption." They ordered food. Alexis recommended a few dishes, and Diego went with her suggestion since the menu might as well have been written in a foreign language. Once the waiter left, Alexis folded her hands on the table and looked at Diego with that same intense focus he remembered from the hangar. "I'm going to say something that's going to sound crazy," she said. "I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Can you do that?" Diego felt his stomach tighten. "Okay. I've spent the last week thinking about a lot of things. My life, my company, my future. I'm 43 years old. I've built something successful, and I'm proud of that. But I'm also exhausted and lonely in ways that most people don't understand. Everyone around me wants something from me. Investors want returns. Employees want leadership. The board wants growth. Potential partners want access to my wealth or my connections." She paused. "Do you know what it's like to wonder if anyone actually sees you as a person?" Diego didn't know where this was going, but he answered honestly. "I can't say I understand your specific situation, but I know what it's like to feel alone. That night in the hangar, I watched you work. I saw how you approached the problem, how you were honest about risks, how you put everything into doing the job right even though you were exhausted. And when we talked, you didn't treat me like a celebrity or a checkbook, you just talked to me like a person." Alexis took a breath. "I've been searching for something for a long time. Partnership. Not business partnership. I have plenty of those. Personal partnership, someone who understands responsibility, who has integrity, who can be trusted. Alexis, I'm not sure what you're asking me. I'm asking you to marry me." Diego's mind went completely blank. He stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I know how it sounds, believe me, I know, but hear me out." Alexis leaned forward slightly. "I'm not talking about a romantic fairy tale. I'm talking about a genuine partnership between two people who respect each other. You need help saving your business and building something sustainable. I need someone in my life who sees me as a person, not a bank account. Someone who understands what it means to work hard, to honor legacy, to care about doing things right. We barely know each other," Diego said, his voice coming out strangled. "I know more than you think. I had my security team run a background check, standard procedure for anyone who works on my aircraft. But I also asked them to compile additional information. Your financial situation, your personal history, character references from people in the industry." She pulled out her phone and showed him a document. "Everyone I spoke to said the same things about you. Honest, skilled, reliable, kind. No criminal record, no scandals, no hidden agendas. You're exactly who you appear to be." Diego felt like he was in a dream. A weird, impossible dream where billionaires proposed marriage to broke mechanics they'd met once. This is insane. Maybe. But think about it logically. You're 32, single, struggling to keep your father's legacy alive but drowning in debt and bad business decisions. I'm 43, single, successful beyond measure, but isolated by that success. I can provide the financial backing to turn your shop into something amazing. A premier specialty facility with the latest equipment and skilled staff. You can provide something I haven't had in years. Genuine companionship with someone who doesn't want anything from me except honest partnership. People don't get married like this, Diego protested. Marriage is supposed to be about love, about building a relationship over time. And how well does that work out? The divorce rate is over 50%, and that's with people who supposedly fell in love before getting married. Alexis's voice was calm, rational, like she was presenting a business proposal, which Diego realized with growing shock was exactly what this was. I'm not looking for passion or romance. I'm looking for partnership, respect, and companionship. Those things can grow into love, or they might not, and that's okay too. Diego ran his hands through his hair, his mind racing. Even if I was crazy enough to consider this, what would it actually look like? You live in a completely different world than I do. We'd figure it out together. I split my time between here and San Francisco for work, but I'd make sure I'm around more. You'd continue running your shop with proper funding and support. We'd be partners in the truest sense. No pretending, no games, just two people building something together. She paused. And to address the obvious question, yes, I'd want a prenuptial agreement. Not to protect myself from you, but to protect you. Everything I invest in your business would be yours, regardless of what happens with the marriage. If it doesn't work out, we part as friends and you keep everything. Why me? Diego asked quietly. You could have anyone. Why would you choose some broke mechanic you met once? Because in one night, you showed me more integrity than most people I've known for years. Because you understand the value of legacy and hard work. Because when I watched you work, I saw someone who cared about doing things right more than taking shortcuts. Alexis's expression softened. And because when you talked about your father, I heard the same kind of love and loss I felt when my dad died. We speak the same language, Diego. Not English or Mandarin. The language of people who build things, who fix things, who care about craftsmanship and honor. The food arrived, interrupting the conversation. Diego stared at his plate without seeing it. His mind was spinning with 1,000 thoughts, none of them coherent. This was absolutely crazy. You didn't marry someone you'd met once, no matter how much money they had or how logical they made it sound. But then again, what did he have to lose? His business was failing. His personal life was non-existent. He hadn't dated anyone seriously in over a year, too consumed with trying to save the shop. He was 32 years old and felt like he was barely surviving, let alone living. I need time to think, he finally said. Of course, I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Alexis picked up her fork. Take a week, think it through, talk to whoever you need to talk to. My lawyer will send you a draft of the prenuptial agreement so you can see exactly what I'm proposing. Look it over with your own lawyer. I'll pay for that, by the way. If after all that you decide it's too crazy, we shake hands and you keep the money from the repair job, no hard feelings. And if I say yes, then we get married quickly and quietly, and we start building something together. A real partnership between equals, even if our bank accounts aren't equal. She smiled slightly. I'm not looking for a trophy husband or someone to show off at events. I'm looking for someone real. Someone I can trust. Someone who might actually understand the weight of responsibility and the loneliness that comes with it. They ate in silence for a while, Diego's mind still reeling. He kept looking at Alexis, trying to see if this was some kind of elaborate joke or test, but her expression remained open, honest, maybe even vulnerable in a way that he wouldn't have expected from someone in her position. Can I ask you something? Diego said eventually. Anything. Are you happy? With all your success, all your money, are you actually happy? Alexis was quiet for a long moment. I'm satisfied with what I've built. I'm proud of my work. But happy? No, not really. I'm respected, I'm successful, I'm influential. But I'm also tired and alone and surrounded by people who see me as a resource rather than a person. She met his eyes. I want to be happy, Diego. I want someone to come home to who actually cares how my day was. I want to build something that matters outside of business metrics and stock prices. Maybe that's selfish or naive, but it's the truth. Diego thought about his own life. His empty apartment. His failing business. The way he'd been going through the motions for 2 years. Feeling like he was slowly disappearing. What Alexis was offering was insane, absolutely insane. But it was also possibly the most honest conversation he'd had with anyone in months. "I'll think about it," he said. "Seriously, think about it. But I'm not making any promises. That's all I ask." Alexis raised her water glass. "To possibilities?" Diego hesitated, then lifted his own glass. "To possibilities." As they finished dinner and said their goodbyes, Diego walked to his truck feeling like the entire world had tilted sideways. A week ago, he'd been ready to give up on everything. Now he had a choice in front of him that defied all logic and reason. The crazy part was he was actually considering it. His phone rang as he started the engine. His sister. "Hey," he answered. "Hey yourself. You haven't called in days." I was starting to worry. Diego sat there in the restaurant parking lot staring out at the city lights. "Can I ask you something hypothetical?" "Sure, what's up?" "If someone offered you a partnership that could save everything you cared about, but it required you to do something completely crazy, would you take it?" His sister laughed. "Diego, your whole career has been doing crazy things that shouldn't work but somehow do. Why would now be any different?" Diego smiled despite himself. "Yeah, I guess you're right about that." He drove home with Alexis's business card on the seat beside him, and for the first time in 2 years, he had absolutely no idea what came next. But somehow that uncertainty felt less like drowning and more like standing at the edge of something new, something that might actually change everything. Diego didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the entire conversation over and over in his mind. Every time he thought about it, the proposal seemed more absurd. Marry a billionaire he'd met once? Base a marriage on logic and partnership instead of love? It was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life. Certainly not in his life. But then again, what was his life right now? Working alone in a failing shop, barely keeping his head above water, watching his father's legacy crumble despite his best efforts. Was that really better than taking a chance on something unconventional? By sunrise, Diego had convinced himself it was a terrible idea, at least 5 times, and a potentially brilliant idea, at least 3 times. He got up, made coffee, and did what he always did when he needed to think. He went to the shop and started working on something with his hands. He was rebuilding a fuel pump when his phone rang. His sister again. "Okay, you can't just ask me weird hypothetical questions and then disappear," she said without preamble. "What's going on?" Diego set down his wrench. His sister was the only family he had left, and if he was going to seriously consider this insanity, he needed to talk to someone about it. "If I tell you something, you have to promise not to judge until I've explained everything." That sounds ominous. But okay, I promise. He told her everything. The emergency repair, the all-night conversation in the hangar, the dinner, the proposal. His sister was silent for so long that Diego thought the call had dropped. "You're serious," she finally said. "A billionaire asked you to marry her." "I know how it sounds. Diego, this is either the best opportunity you'll ever get or the setup for a true crime documentary. I honestly can't tell which." She paused. "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut is completely useless right now. Half of me thinks I should run away as fast as possible. The other half keeps thinking about what she said about partnership and understanding responsibility. We connected that night, and I don't mean in a romantic way. It was like talking to someone who actually got it, you know? Do you trust her?" That was the question, wasn't it? Diego thought about Alexis sitting on that equipment crate at 3 in the morning, talking about her father. The way she'd been honest about her loneliness, about what she was really looking for. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I think I do." Then talk to a lawyer. Look at whatever agreement she's proposing. If it's legitimate and protects you, then maybe this crazy thing isn't as crazy as it seems. His sister's voice softened. "You've been barely surviving for 2 years, Diego. Maybe it's time to try actually living." Over the next few days, Diego did his homework. He researched Alexis obsessively, reading every article, watching every interview he could find. What he discovered surprised him. Beneath the polished business persona was someone who'd maintained a connection to her roots. She donated hundreds of millions to educational programs for underprivileged kids. In one interview from a few years back, she talked about how loneliness was the hidden cost of success. How the higher you climbed, the fewer people you could really trust. Everyone wants to be your friend when you're successful, she'd said in that interview. But very few people want to know you as a person. They want access, they want connections, they want to say they know you. But do they actually care about you? Usually not. Diego found himself watching that interview clip 3 times. The way Alexis had said those words, there was real pain there, real isolation. He understood that feeling. Even if their circumstances were completely different, he'd spent 2 years pushing people away, convinced that if he just worked hard enough he could solve everything himself. But all he'd done was end up alone. The prenuptial agreement arrived via email on the 3rd day. Diego took it to a lawyer his father had worked with years ago, an older man named Frank who'd handled the estate paperwork after his dad died. Frank read through the document carefully, his eyebrows climbing higher with each page. Finally, he set it down and looked at Diego over his reading glasses. "Son, I've seen a lot of prenups in my career. This is the most one-sided agreement I've ever encountered, and not in the way you'd expect." He tapped the papers. "According to this, she's offering to invest $2 million into your business immediately, with another $3 million available over the next 2 years for expansion. All of it becomes yours regardless of what happens to the marriage. She keeps all her assets separate, asks for nothing from you financially, and if you divorce, you keep everything including any property purchased together." "So it's legitimate?" "Legitimate. Diego, this woman is basically handing you a lottery ticket and asking for nothing in return except companionship and partnership. Either she's the most generous person I've ever heard of or—" Frank paused. "Or she's exactly what she claims to be. Someone who has more money than she could ever spend and is willing to invest in someone she believes in. That doesn't seem real." "No, it doesn't. But the contract is ironclad. You'd be protected from every angle I can think of." Frank leaned back in his chair. "The question isn't whether this is a good deal legally. It's whether you can handle the personal side of it. Can you really marry someone you barely know? Can you build a partnership with someone from a completely different world?" Diego didn't have an answer to that. He spent the weekend thinking, pacing his small apartment, making lists of pros and cons that didn't actually help clarify anything. Sunday evening, he found himself at his father's grave, something he hadn't done in months. He sat on the grass next to the headstone and talked out loud, feeling only slightly ridiculous. "I don't know what to do. Dad, this is either the stupidest idea in the world or the opportunity of a lifetime, and I can't tell which." Diego pulled up a handful of grass, then let it fall. "You always said to trust my skills but verify my assumptions. Well, my skills tell me I can make the business work if I have the resources, and my assumptions tell me this is too good to be true. But what if it's not?" The wind rustled through the trees. Diego sat there as the sun set, thinking about everything his father had taught him. Take calculated risks. Trust your instincts. Don't let fear make your decisions. And maybe most importantly, sometimes the unconventional solution is the right one. By the time Diego left the cemetery, he'd made up his mind. He called Alexis that night. She answered on the second ring. "I have conditions," he said without preamble. "I'm listening. First, we take this 1 year at a time. We commit to really trying, to being genuine partners, but we both get to walk away after a year if it's not working." "Agreed." "Second, I keep my independence. The shop is mine to run how I want. I'll listen to advice, but I make the final decisions about my business." "Of course, that's the whole point." "Third, we're honest with each other. No games, no pretending. If something's not working, we talk about it." Diego took a breath. "And fourth, we acknowledge that this is unconventional and weird, and we're both okay with that. No trying to force it to be something it's not." "Those are good conditions," Alexis said.